Oh god, what is this? What is that? Oh, it's just wine. I can't drink any of the wine. That's also terrifying.
I've been busy with a lot of other projects, so I haven't been able to work on as many games as I would like, but I want to make a Halloween horror game for a friend to play. The goal was to make it by or around Halloween, and the game was to be made in a week for her to play. However, my friend doesn't play horror games due to, well, horror elements. So the challenge is, how would I make a horror game for someone who doesn't like horror games? Well, the game must have pandas, as they like pandas. It cannot have jump scares, because people not into horror games will immediately quit on those, and I personally find them pretty cheap to use. Most games overuse them, but some of them do it fairly well. Finally, it must be completable in a relatively short time, as making it go on too long would also cause them to quit. So, the final game design was as follows. They must find and collect 5 pandas scattered in the level. The level begins with full lights. On the 4th panda, the lights will go out and the level is now dark, requiring the use of a flashlight. On collecting the last panda, one of the 4 exits will unlock, but the player will have to find the correct one. Once they open the door and run through, they win. The monster will not spawn until the first panda is collected. The monster does not know where the player is and can only find them by line of sight in order to be fair. But there's additional caveats I'll explain later. If the monster catches you, you lose. With that, I set out to create the game. I used a free apartment asset kit from the Unity asset store to make the level. These snap-on pieces made it fast to create the level, but I don't like how the mesh overlaps and creates these weird artifacts at certain angles. However, it's good enough for a 1-week deadline. Of course, all the paintings were replaced with free clip arts or wallpapers of pandas. The level was made with the intention that there's no long sightlines for the most part. There's breaks that prevent someone or the AI from looking straight down the hall and spotting something, so that gives a more cramped atmosphere. For the panda placements, I made a place in each of the 9 rooms where they could be, with the AI director randomly placing 5 in those spots. One of the 4 exit doors will unlock when the last panda is collected, randomly chosen by the AI director. The radar device is placed in one of the 5 locations in the level. This part was fun to create. The idea is the panda monster will have a sight cone that's adjustable and will immediately chase a player once found. It keeps track of the last known position of the player based on sight, and when it loses sight, it will go to the last seen position before doing a random search around the area for a short bit. That was the original plan, but I noticed while testing that this would cause the monster to lose track too easily. There would be cases where the monster would go to the corner and realistically, it should see the player still around the corner, but it doesn't, which makes it go in a random direction, possibly the opposite, which felt very unnatural. To cheat this and make it feel more like a chase, I gave the monster the position of the player even after it lost sight, but only for 0.75 seconds. In this way, you can say that the monster saw the player turn a corner and would do the same to follow. This felt much more realistic and led to the AI sometimes cutting off the player in certain situations, which was a welcome surprise. I had a custom script that showed where the AI was going in the last known player position, so I could easily see what was working and what wasn't. Whenever the monster isn't chasing, it follows a random patrol path around the map. I made custom nodes with editor scripts that allowed me to see how they linked and correctly linked to each other whenever you add a new node as a neighbor. The initial idea was to have the AI choose a random neighbor and go to it, then choose another random neighbor that wasn't the previous and continue. However, this led to a common situation where the AI would get stuck in a triangle and just patrol between 3 points, getting stuck in one area. To combat this, I added a node decay system where every time it visited a node, the weight of the node becomes 0, and every time it visited another node, all previous visited node weights would increase by a certain amount. In this way, it was more likely that the AI would travel across the entire level instead of getting stuck in a loop. For path following, I allowed the monster to open the doors by making the doors not block the nav mesh, but if the monster pushed against the door, it would open. The player would be able to hear doors opening at a distance if they paid attention. Once the player grabs the first panda figurine, the monster will spawn on the furthest node from the player and begin its patrol. If we kept with only this system, it's possible the AI would never find the player, which would defeat the point of this horror game. So I added one more slight cheat. an invisible tension meter. Whenever the monster was active, a tension meter would start increasing for every moment it hasn't seen the player. Whenever the meter would hit a threshold, the AI director would then tell the monster exactly where the player was at that moment, and the monster would make its way there. The tension meter resets at this point and repeats. Every figurine that the player picks up increases the rate of the tension meter, making it more likely the monster would find the player at the end. I made sure the player would always have enough time to evade it. During playtests, an unintended side effect was the more the player hid, the more likely the monster would constantly patrol nearby, leading to situations where it would camp the player.
It's camping my body again.
Oh god. It's literally just pacing! Dude!
After the players noticed this, they came to the realization they had to make a break for it when it left, leading to some nice moments of terror when they forced their way out when the monster left the room. To make the game less scary, the player has some advantages against the AI. For one, the lockers were made to be absolute safe zones. The AI will not know where the player is if they hide in a locker, even when the tension meter is full, but will know the general area. Originally, I was going to design the AI to still catch you if it saw you enter the locker, but that would be too intense for a lighter horror game, so I made it a safe spot for players to retreat to. Second, the player can find a radar that allows them to pinpoint the monster in a cone area in front of them. This will allow them to stay one step ahead of the monster and avoid them as they explored. Initially, the player started with the radar and could use it at any time, but some playtests revealed this trivialized the game, so I changed it to be something you had to find and it had limited battery life. To keep in the spirit of making it a lighter horror game, I added options when starting the game to revert it back to the easier mode. Third, the player has no footsteps when walking, but the monster will always have footsteps. I made all sounds directional, so the player would be able to get a rough idea of where the monster was just by audio alone if they listened. This applied to creaking doors as well. Lastly, every good horror game needs a stamina meter when running. The player can run much faster than a monster, but for short bursts. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I want to make a realistic feeling flashlight in the game. To do this, there's 3 parts to it. First was getting a light cookie for how a real flashlight shines against the surface. If you don't have a cookie, then you have a flat circle which works, but doesn't feel right. The light pattern gives it an extra polish. Second was reflected light. A spotlight by itself only lights the area in front of it, but a real flashlight also lights the area around it, but not as much. To simulate this, I added a second spotlight that's much weaker than the main spotlight, but has a bigger spread. Third was post-processing. There's light bloom being added, so when it's close to walls or obstacles, there's more of a glow. When combined together, it gives a very satisfying flashlight look to the game. Now that the main mechanics and levels were done, it's time to add the finishing touches. I needed a basic settings UI for adjusting mouse sensitivity and audio volume, as well as the main menu, and an intro tutorial section to explain the game. I drew some very quick sketches and stuck in a random plot point for why you're in this place. I also did some playtesting with friends so I can get a gauge for how scary it was to them and take notes of any gameplay issues. With that, the game was complete and I sent it to my friend who played it while streaming. It's a great feeling seeing others enjoy a game you made. Anyway, thanks for watching and good luck with your game projects.